Yeah, go ahead. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Polk County Board of Commissioners. It's January 18th, 2022. Extra agendas are on the back table there. If you finally join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All board members are present and looking for approval of minutes.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed unanimously. Next up is COVID update. Jackie,
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
you can.
Excellent. All right. Well, Happy New Year. We will go ahead and jump into some data. We're going to go a little bit back in time just because the state hasn't updated things yet for last week because of the holiday yesterday. So looking at the week of January 2nd, there were 45,385 cases reported in the state for a total. Now this total is as of the 14th, so it does include last week's data, 513,391. There were 45 deaths reported, and we are up to 5,883 deaths. Looking at our county, we had just under 900 cases reported for the week of the 2nd. Our total case count of reported cases is 10,661, and our total deaths stands at 116. So looking at our case rate and test positivity rate for the week of the 2nd in the state, we had a case rate of 1,063 and a test positivity rate of 21.6. And then in Polk County for that same week, we had a case rate of 1,072 cases and a test positivity rate of 22.1. Looking at who is getting COVID in our county for that same week, the week of January 2nd, between our 19 and under population represented 21% of our cases reported, our 20 to 29-year-olds, 22% of cases reported, and then it just trickles down from there. Looking at our zip code data, West Salem had 334 reported cases, Dallas 215, Monmouth 162, Independence 113, Falls City 16, Grand Ronde 26, Rick Real 10. Cases in the workplace right now, DRV has 8 total cases, Capital Manor has 17. Looking at our testing in the county, we did almost 4,000 tests for the week of the 2nd. So that's gone up quite a bit. Looking at our hospitalizations, currently there are 811 hospitalized COVID-19 positive patients in Oregon. 153 are in the ICU, and 73 of these are on ventilators. For Region 2, we have 125 hospitalized COVID-19 positive patients. 81 of 83 ICU beds are occupied. 539 of 557 non-ICU beds are occupied. We're not able to track our hospitalized Polk County residents with COVID-19 at this point, but we're working on that with the state. Salem Health, this data is as of yesterday. They had 90 COVID-19 positive patients, 52 of which are unvaccinated. They have 11 in the ICU. They have 5 on ventilator support. And this just gives you an idea of kind of where we're seeing our increase again in hospitalizations. Commissioner Mordhorst, you had asked me at the last meeting about what things were like pre-pandemic in the hospitals. And I checked with Salem Health. They said pre-COVID, they ran at about 80 to 85% capacity, and 85% is what they consider to be a full hospital. So just a follow-up on that.
Thank you.
Moving to our vaccine data, so we're right around 80% of our vaccination for our 18 and older population, which coincidentally is where we were at the last time I was here. OHA scrubbed some data, so I think they took out some duplicates, which is why it doesn't look like we've really moved the needle very much. Our vaccine rate by total county population is up a couple of percent to 68%. And our boosters are up to 36.5%. So that's exciting. We have seen some increases kind of across the board for age groups receiving the vaccine. Our 5 to 11-year-olds had another 5% increase, so they're sitting at about 5%. And then all of our other age groups increased between about 0.7 and 1.3%. So we are still doing a lot of vaccination in our county, and we're looking to step that up as well, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then looking at our vaccination rates by zip code, again, we're seeing an increase across the board. Independence had a 3.2% increase, Monmouth was 2.5%, Grand Ronde 3.7%, Fall City 1.4%, Dallas 2.4%, and West Salem 3.5%. And then I included another graph in here that just talks about, or just demonstrates kind of what our daily count is looking at like for our vaccination. So we kind of had a little bit of a dip, of course, over the Christmas holidays, and now we're trending back up. So what's currently running in our county, besides pharmacies, besides primary healthcare clinics for vaccine and testing, our Mikasita Market event is still going every Saturday. We're going to do this through at least the end of February at this point, based on current numbers. The last event was this past Saturday. They did 139 vaccines, 263 tests, which is a dramatic increase. Back before the holidays, on the 18th, when we did an event, they did 3 tests. So you can see where the increase has come. And then just starting Saturday, Spirit Mountain Casino has opened a daily vaccine event that also offers testing. And that's going to be 7 days a week. And then what we're doing is we're planning with the central, well, all the school districts actually, to offer a vaccine event. So Central, West Salem High School, the Dallas School District, we have events planned for next week, and then another event 3 weeks from there. We have an event planned for OCDC, and then we're also looking at standing up a weekly event at the fairgrounds for testing and vaccine as well, just to make sure we have enough access in our community. And just another couple general updates. Because of the surge and because of the changes that the Oregon Health Authority has made to our case investigation guidelines that we follow for COVID-19 response, we're no longer reaching out to every positive case in the county. We don't have the staffing for that. We're also not doing contact tracing. That's just winding down now. When there's this much disease in the community, it doesn't help us move the needle very much to do case investigation and contact tracing of every single person who has COVID or comes into contact with it. What questions do you have for me?
So Jackie, I got a couple for you. On the total number of cases, that's from the start, that's 2 years now, we're at 10,061 positive.
Correct, yeah.
16 deaths. And also on the vaccination rates, is there a certain number that we heard that we could reach that a lot of these restrictions would go away? I know at one time they said once we became 70% vaccination rate, face masks would drop off, or distancing or restrictions to businesses. Is that number still there? Is it 80%, or you heard anything on it?
Yeah, it does seem to be a bit of a moving target. Now, back when we had a lot of restrictions in terms of capacities in stores and businesses and restaurants, all of that already went away. So the only restriction that I see at this point is masking, and they haven't really gave an indicator of where or when we would draw the line and say we no longer have to do that. Certainly not during an Omicron surge, but beyond that, that would be a great question for the state, but they haven't really given an indicator on what that would look like.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Of course.
Next up, District Attorney Aaron Felton.
Chairman, members of the commission. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman, on this is the first meeting I've been able to appear. Well, you have been elevated to the chair, and so congratulations. Pleasure always to be invited to appear in front of the commission. Also, I congratulate you on the new format of the public being able to view these meetings online. I think that is an outstanding step forward in transparency and open government. And I think that the commission will certainly benefit, and I think all of our citizens benefit from being able to see these meetings online and being able to see how our government works. And so I appreciate that opportunity, and I congratulate you on that step. I am also, as you can see, I'm wearing a county-provided N95 mask, and I want to appreciate Mr. Bender supplying that. I requested those for my office, for those who are choosing. If they would like to have one of those, I appreciate the opportunity to make those available for folks. So I'm wearing one today as an example of what we're doing to support folks who are in our office, because we are in close quarters upstairs, as you know. It is very uncomfortable, and I can't, but I do appreciate the opportunity to wear it. And I think actually I can communicate better wearing it. But I do appreciate the county making these available for folks who choose to wear them. And we got a big box of them upstairs for our folks. So thank you very much for that opportunity. And we're doing it because, frankly, and based on the conversation that was just had about whether the masking limitation will still be in effect, and certainly during the surge right now, given that our folks are, just given the high transferability of Omicron, our folks are going into basically uncontrolled places with people coming back and forth, as many folks in our county are. I think it's just it's prudent that we have these. Our folks are going in with grand jury, with courts, as pro and probation does, and many of our folks in public safety are going in the field. We're continuing to have trials, and members of the public are coming back and forth, and our victims advocates are meeting with members of the public as well. Again, I think it's prudent until we have the best advice possible to take good, prudent steps for the public, and also the safety of our employees here. So I appreciate that. A couple points I do want to make and bring the commission up to date on. I sent some information to you about this discovery fee issue that's going on. Senate Bill 751, which was passed in the last session, made some, and I won't go into a lengthy discourse on what Senate Bill 751, but it did make some changes to the discovery requirements. As the commission is aware, the state is required to provide discovery about any case it files against an individual. We're provided to provide all reports and any information to the defense counsel that we may rely upon in the case that we intend to prove against them. There were some updates to that. And really, I'll tell you before I get to my main point, it really didn't have an effect on us. The major change was that the state is required to provide a copy of everything that we intend to use in our case against an individual. The big change was the statute previously had said just to make available. Some counties had interpreted that as a scenario of, well, we have this, you can come look at it, rather than here's a copy of it. That's the most significant change. We have always provided copies. What we did years ago when I took office is we established through the great financial support of this commission years ago was to go to an electronic case management system, which means we could provide electronic copies to defense counsel. We've been doing that for years. So really, we've kind of absorbed the hit years ago and over many years in providing electronic copies of police reports, of any body cams, any digital media. We've been doing that for years. So really, the substantive change didn't change how we did business anyway. What the real controversy came about is that the Oregon Public Defense Services interpreted Senate Bill 751 to mean we could no longer charge for that. For years, every prosecutor's office in the state has charged for that. Different counties charge different amounts for it. And so what I supplied to you, because we disagree, counties around the state, we simply disagree that that was part of this bill, because nowhere in the bill is it mentioned. Nowhere in the legislation was this discovery fee issue mentioned. So we said, whoa, let's go back to the legislature. We had a disagreement. Oregon District Attorneys Association had a disagreement. I'm not sure where OAC and other folks fell down, but without speaking for the organization, I'd be confident that at a minimum, OAC would say, well, that wasn't in the bill. So our position was, let's go back to the legislature and have a conversation about that and perhaps address it in a short session. There was disagreement, and we've continued to have that conversation. The information I supplied to you, commissioners, was for the last 5 years what Polk County had charged. And you could see it's been, well, between approximately between mid 50,000 to upwards of close to 80,000 some years dollars. And obviously, since we're a medium-sized county, you can imagine smaller counties much less, your larger counties significantly more. So it's not a small matter. I can tell you, as of last week, this matter has been taken up with legislators, and I without saying how they might look at it, I think that they're favorably disposed to our point of view. But you never know. Short session hasn't even started. How that may be resolved, I don't know. But I think we're receiving a very favorable hearing in terms of our point of view on that piece. Another piece of legislation that will be of interest, I think, certainly to counties in terms of the administrative piece. You're all familiar with the Ramos, the Ramos case, but the unanimous jury verdicts. We, from a DA's perspective, my organization came out in favor of unanimous juries. We're in favor that juries should be unanimous. That is the law. That's happened. In fact, I was the one that sat down from the Judiciary Committee and said, we're in favor of it. The DA's Association is in favor of unanimous jury verdicts. The sticky wicket is, should it be retroactive? Should it apply to cases that have already been decided or not? We're not in favor of that. And so we have great issues around going back in time and rehashing old cases. It is very traumatic to victims. And depending on how you would do that, it can also be very hard to retry cases just from an administrative piece, from nothing else. Retrying a case means bringing victims back, potentially re-traumatizing them, finding witnesses that may have moved. There is obviously a fiscal impact to that as well for counties. Now we can do it, we have done it, and a great example is the case that was tried successfully just last week, the quote stinky feet case, for lack of a better term. The Quinn Hardin case actually is the name of the defendant, successfully tried. We had to do that 3 times, and frankly, if you look at the press coverage, there's a quote from one of the victims saying, I paraphrase, if not for the DAs and the victim's assistants, we wouldn't have been able to come back. And that is very, very true. All these cases involve great, great work by individual lawyers and especially victims advocates working intensely with victims to bring them back to the place where they can think about trying a very traumatic case again. We had to do it 3 times. First time because of Ramos, we had to come back after a successful guilty on 20. I mean, I can't remember how many counts the first time, but on the 3rd time it was 29 counts that were guilty. Second time I had to come back because there was a COVID issue, but still that's 3 separate times. These victims, young victims and their families had to come back. So that's just an example of when folks say, oh, it's no big deal to bring a case back. It's a huge deal. Even the thought of it is a big deal. So there is a conversation going on in the legislature about how we might address that. There is legislation about how to fix that issue and address that issue. So that's going on. So prosecutors, including myself, are talking to legislators about making them aware of, if you just go back and try to go make it retroactive, there are extraordinary human, emotional costs in doing it, not to mention real dollar costs in doing that, and weigh that out if you decide to do that. So that's happening.
Let me jump in and
Yes,
ask you a
sir.
question on that one before we go too far. So is there an LC or a bill number yet?
Let me There actually is. Let me get that for you offline because I don't have it. But
Okay.
yes, there is actual legislation that has been proposed.
Okay, so I'd like to see that and figure out how to help from the board's position to help weigh in and advocate.
Yes, sir.
Specifically so I'm very concerned about this as well. And, you know, there will be outcomes of going back that will absolutely impact families and victims. There's no way to even speculate on that. It just is. But do you know, for Polk County, how many cases we're talking about and how far back would that retro go?
I'm going to give you an answer that you're not going to like. It
I'm
depends.
doing it for the people. I want them to hear this.
Yes. It depends because for the little bit that was revealed at the committee preview days, the proponents of the bill think it may be just 2 cases for Polk County. Now, if you apply their logic and their analysis, they say, well, it's not that big a deal. And you may say that that's not that big a deal, but I counter with, even if it's just 2 cases, that is a huge deal in terms of the trauma that creates to the victims of those cases just thinking about it. So I cannot just shrug and be indifferent to that. So I disagree that it's not that big a deal. But I would also say, even in a larger county, because the proponents of this legislation would say, well, in larger counties where they have lots and lots of prosecutors, you know, the challenge is much less because they have so many other prosecutors. I disagree, because even in larger counties, say a Washington County, perhaps, or a Clackamas County, often, you know, sex crimes cases or violent crimes cases are divided into smaller units. But even though you may, as a larger county, have, say, 35 prosecutors or more in some counties, you still have a small core of prosecutors and victims advocates working these cases. So sometimes they're very much like a small office as well in microcosm. So it's never not that big a deal when you're dealing with cases that have human trauma like that, because you're still dealing with the lives of victims. And it's one victim and it means the world to them. So being indifferent to the trauma that even the mention of these cases causes has real significance. And they still have real dollar significance to all counties involved. So I'm saying they're saying it was approximately 2. I don't know yet because it depends on how you define who the legislation infects. Does this mean every possible person who has had a non-unanimous jury? It's hard to define because they weren't keeping track forever persons who, whether the jury was unanimous or not unanimous. That's a real barrier to everyone seeking relief under that. So it's unknown at this point.
So in the current conditions of the governor's advocacy for commutation on a lot of cases, does this law, even with its unknowns here that you're looking for solutions to, do future commutations, or would commutations be allowed for cases like these 2 that you're suggesting?
Commutations is a separate issue. The governor could still commute or pardon almost without reservation. That's a separate category of cases. The governor's executive power of clemency is extraordinary, and it's a different category.
But what I'm asking you, Mr. DA, is that a tool that can be used even if you don't get resolution in this bill that you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So regardless of what we advocate for here in a retro conversation, a governor could still commute a sentence.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. I'll just summarize by, or conclude, I'm so sorry, by saying that we are still struggling with our hiring issues, but some good news is we have brought on a law clerk from Willamette just last week. So that is a positive piece of moving the needle forward. But also, as I've worked more on this, more of my colleagues have been just coincidentally, there was an article in, I think, the Eastern Oregon, talking about 5 other counties in Eastern Oregon who are facing the same issue. I thought it was just sort of kismet that also the article in the itemizer had also come out talking about the issues that we're facing here as well. So it's an extraordinary time right now that elected DAs throughout the state right now are struggling with filling openings. And so I just add that to the layer, but we're all working on the same issue. And also at the same time, I don't say there's all the same, but OPDS, there was an article about they're continuing to have, and this is not news, they've made this pitch to the legislature, filling their own positions as well. So criminal justice as a whole is really suffering the same types of things as you talked about, industry in general. So it's just really an extraordinary time in industry, but criminal justice, the profession as well right now, and getting not just young people, but perhaps other people mid-career otherwise to come into this profession, which I still will say is the best way to start your career out, whatever you choose to do with your legal career, in terms of gaining good skills as a lawyer. So on that happy note, any other questions?
Thank
As
you.
always, thank you very much.
Next, that's broadband proposal. Dean Anderson. Wow.
Still muted.
Welcome,
Do you hear me
Dean.
now, folks?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for let me present today. Basically, what we're presenting on is making a recommendation for the Polk County Broadband grant proposals. Our grant proposal process closed last week. We had a good number of grant proposals. We were looking for grants for the Northwest Dallas area, the Southwest Dallas area, West Salem, some secondary areas, including Cloud Corner. We identified those priority areas by having a high percentage of folks that either had very low service or no service. And that grant process went out. We told the vendors that we were looking to evaluate grants based on the number of folks they were going to serve, the location, cost effectiveness, the cost mass relative to the cost per customer, speed of service, and the ability to provide access to low fixed income residents. We did not evaluate 2 proposals. One proposal came in early and was modified. Basically, it was a set of notes from Adaptive, and we elected not to evaluate that as it did not match our grant proposal process. LS Networks requested an extension till January 21st. We elected, based on our evaluation of our the folks who applied, we elected not to wait and make our recommendation now. Of course, the board can consider extending that out to see what LS Networks would provide. In our analysis, the only information that I did not provide was that Charter requested that their costs were proprietary. I included in our analysis some broader numbers to protect the proprietary nature of their proposal. So effectively, what we're asking the board to allow us to enter into contract negotiations for the following projects. MyNet, with providing services to Cloud Corner and Rick Real for $300,000. Alerica, providing services to Northwest Dallas using wireless, a new wireless project, for $795,000. MyNet, providing service to Southwest Dallas for a little over $1 million. And MyNet doing a feasibility study for Falls City for $20,000. Both Falls City and Rick Real had some areas in them where they had fiber service. Based on additional analysis, that fiber service was not widespread and sometimes difficult to get. Following the federal analysis of looking at services for a community, we elected to see what other types of services could be possible in Falls City. So elected to do a Falls City study with Minet. Those are the 4 projects. What ends up happening as a result of those is that we will have a fiscal impact of a little over $2 million and will increase services to over 1,000 rural county residents, which is pretty cool. I have a list of vendors, amounts, costs, and so forth. I didn't know if you wanted to go through the details of that. We certainly can if you want to go through those. Questions regarding the grants. Again, we're looking for a recommendation that we enter into negotiations. I've also asked the 2 successful responders, Minet and Alirka, to be able to present to you folks next Tuesday, so you can ask them specific questions about their projects. If you so desire, we can do that as well. Questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would tell you all that this is a really good mix of fixed wireless and fiber. And I'm very excited to see how these come together and see how quickly we can connect the numbers of homes that are suggested in these 2 applications, or these 2 vendors' applications. And so that everybody understands that the intention, of course, for us is that we encourage more fiber build out for the future. That is clearly the direction we all need to be going, and everybody that works in this broadband communication world says that's what we need to be focused on, and working our way towards that as much as we possibly can. Additionally, I would tell you that these projects, especially the look at Falls City, these projects will lend themselves well to their applications, those vendors' applications with Oregon Broadband, we believe. So I really do want to encourage the board to support these applications, these proposals. And I think we're well on our way to making a significant difference with the work that we've done with all of these folks. I am very pleased that we had so many proposals come in, but they all did come in at the 11th hour for the most part on the final day. And though we do have one that's still hanging out there, I think that we'll still be able to have those conversations with LS Networks specifically going forward. But for the $2 million that we have to invest, I don't see a value in waiting for their proposal. The committee has had enough conversation with LS Networks to have a pretty good understanding of what they are likely to come forward with and what they're not likely to come forward with. And so I think that, again, these proposals that we have, I think, are really low-hanging fruit, and we do need to take advantage of them.
I'm very pleased that 2 of the high priority areas are being addressed in this round. I do have a question, Dean, and a question about funding. So we, like Commissioner Pope said, we only have $2 million to work with, but the lyrical proposals to serve Northwest Dallas, they proposed installing fiber and then the fixed wireless. There's about $800,000 difference, wireless to fiber. Do you see any opportunities, whether it's with Oregon Broadband or other federal resources, to partner with the state or federal government to be proactive with the fiber installation? Do you think that's worth pursuing or asking about?
That's a great question. That was a struggle for me when we were evaluating these. The response from the feds, given their definition of low areas, where our low areas are and their low areas are, don't match. So because they do their evaluations on a larger area, they include the city of Dallas with that surrounding rural area. So the likelihood of them getting a grant from the feds in that area is pretty low. And I really, I think the committee, because the state of Oregon has yet to develop rules, I really don't think we want to wait. It's also a real opportunity to work with Alerica, who also provides fixed wireless in other parts, for us to work with them on a new type of technology that will give us much higher speeds. What you'll see in the analysis that their speeds with fixed wireless are going to be exceed 100 megabit, which is very, very good. So felt that this far exceeded, it matches what our long-term plans are. I'm not overly confident that that area will be addressed, and it's a real difficult area, Northwest Dallas, to get into. And I just don't see the state or the feds being able to step up in those areas, just because they're so close to where better services are available, and they've lumped it all. They've lumped it all on the state maps. They've lumped it all together on the federal maps. I just don't see those areas being addressed, or us being able to be successful in those areas. One of the reasons that we selected also Northwest and Southwest Dallas, and in addition to that, just west of West Salem as our high priority areas, is that it's so difficult to get the feds to recognize those areas as needing services. So I just don't see them being able to address those in the future. And this fits our $2 million budget. Actually, it exceeds it a bit. I'd turn it over to Greg to discuss dollar issues in that he's the fiscal guy.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, just a clarification on funding. A majority of this is going to be funded by monies we receive from the state. I discussed the Senator Boquist allotment to Polk County to address broadband. We've shipped that off to the state. We should be receiving our $1.68 million, which will help fund this. The balance of the funding will occur from ARPA funds. We originally had 300 or so thousand in there as our budget estimate. This will require us to have 447,000 be placed to address the 4 projects, but well within our ARPA money allotment and flexibility in the budget that I've built for it. So, you know, the only other way, if Dean's correct in getting grant funding or that for that Northwest area, you would probably have to add the additional 800,000 out of ARPA funds, which may or may not conflict with other things we're trying to do. So I think the list is very good. Dean had his ideas. I had mine separately. Mine came more from the fiscal side. Dean came from the service side, but they still both matched when we met as a group to determine which projects to select in that. So overall, I think the process was good. I didn't sit through all the process, but I think they did a very good job vetting all these. You did get pretty good results, especially with this many vendors and that. So I would also recommend that we move forward with these 4 projects and have the 2 vendors come in and at least get a feel for them and talk to them next week.
So do we need to vote on this?
I think we should. So I would move to approve the proposals as presented.
I'll second that.
I'll agree to that also.
I assume there will be a similar reporting schedule as the first round with Alerica, just so we can get updates on progress.
Yes.
The vendors, okay.
We'll need reports on progress, plus I have to do fiscal reports for both ARPA and for Senator Boquist's money. So yeah, there'll be plenty of reporting and updates and that for the board.
So Dean, I'd just like to share, and Commissioner Polk, thank you for your work on this and Mr. Hanson. When COVID first hit, it became very apparent that Polk County was very challenged with internet access for most of our public. 50% of the houses in rural Polk County had no internet, or what they had was very poor. And the change he made in the first round a year ago was amazing. I think we brought it up to 90%. And to see this again and improve now with I just drew a blank.
Additional families being served.
Yeah, the other 1,000, but I was thinking of, rather than wireless, for going to
Fiber.
fiber. Thank you. That was the one word that slipped my mind this morning. Senior moment. I'm almost there. I almost qualify. But just knowing that the efforts were going and what you guys put into this, we want to thank you very much. This is very exciting.
I'll second that. And I'm just really impressed with the drilling deep into the data in our locations. And it's troubling to me that some of this doesn't match what the feds are seeing. And hopefully some of that information can trickle up to them to improve their efforts. So I'm happy to advocate for that in any way possible, but really appreciate your efforts, everybody.
Would you like to have presentations next week? Both vendors are available to talk and just be available to answer questions that you may have, if you're so inclined.
I'd say yes, please.
Okay. So I'll ask them to do a short presentation, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then avail themselves to a question and answer. So do both vendors present for 15-20 minutes each. Does that seem all right?
I think that's fair. Perfect.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, private family burial grounds.
Do we have to dispose of the motion? Have we voted on that?
Oh, do we need to vote on that motion?
We should.
Okay. So all those in favor on the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Sydney Mulder and Mr. Austin McWiggins.
Good morning, Austin McWiggin, Polk County Community Development Director with Sydney Mulder, our planning manager. As you're aware, we get inquiries regarding private family burials periodically. The county policy also, as you're aware, has been to apply state law. Private family burials are regulated under Oregon statute, and it's overseen by the Cemetery and Mortuary Board. Our policy, as you know, has been to apply those requirements at the time that we get an inquiry that someone is interested in doing a private family burial. This last legislative session, as you're also aware, there was a bill that allows now for the composting of human remains. It's unclear at this point whether or not that occurs at a facility that's regulated by the Cemetery and Mortuary Board, much like cremation. And then the soil would be the result of that, would come back. And so we've, since we last talked, we've tried to get some clarity from the Cemetery and Mortuary Board, and they're uncertain at this point in terms of how it's going to be regulated, and that they're working on administrative rules for that very purpose. So with that, we'd asked, we thought maybe this would be a time to revisit that policy, just to make sure that we want to continue with the existing policy we have, or did we want to maybe develop some additional local regulations in order to address issues or concerns that may arise, particularly as a result of the passing of that bill, as we've had more inquiries into that in the planning department. In light of the fact that we really still don't know a whole lot about what that's going to entail and what those administrative rules are going to look like, staff would recommend that we continue with our status quo. And as we know more, if we see that there are potential issues, we could bring this issue back to the Board of Commissioners. And then Sydney can answer any technical issues or questions you may have regarding private family burials.
I guess the only other thing I can add real quick is when I did reach out to the Oregon Mortuary and Cemetery Board, something that I discovered was with this bill, there's another process that was added as well, in addition to the natural organic reduction, which is the formal term for human composting. There's also a process called hydrolysis, which is commonly referred to as water cremation. So I think that that's more evident that that's occurring off-site and not on someone's private property, but that is something that's also as a result of this bill. And then it also doesn't become effective until July 1st of 2022. So they're trying to develop those regulations and rules in anticipation of that effective date.
The only one that we see that could potentially impact our land use policies would be the composting component, not the other components. And so we're just uncertain whether or not that does impact our land use policies. And if it in fact does, then we could revisit this issue.
So for context, for anyone who may be watching this video or listening, I started asking these questions about private burial opportunities from pre-2014 because I had seen in an opportunity where it's possible that a person could buy a piece of property and not know that this has happened on a piece of property and potentially run into through some excavation process, not know that this a burial had existed on a piece of property. And so I'm curious about, Sydney, whether or not your inquiries with the mortuary board and others have led you to understand there are more of these happening than you know of.
More of in the sense of the burial component or
Yes.
the future?
No, I don't care about the future one. Again,
Okay.
that's,
I would
we
say-
know that that's still a mystery.
I would say that it's pretty much been status quo. If I had to guess, I'd say 3 to 5 inquiries a year consistently. So I don't think that it's necessarily increased over the past few years. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to understand, again, for what we've talked about, over the years has been, it's really not an issue. It's not, we don't have a bunch of people coming into the county. And that's one pathway for us to know if people were coming to the county saying, hey, I want to put grandpa out in the back 40. There could be a process for that. But if what we do know is that mortuaries are supposed to qualify where they're moving someone to or where they're releasing someone to for burial. And so I was curious about whether or not your investigation found that there are more releases to private individuals for burial, private burials than maybe we knew about.
No, I mean, my correspondence with the mortuary board was pretty specific in the context of, is the human composting allowed to occur on site on someone's private property, meaning the process itself, or is it more like a cremation where it's occurring offsite? So that was really the sidebars of the conversation.
Our concern has been a change in process, not necessarily a concern that's arising as a result of the quantity of these types of burials that are occurring. We don't believe that there's a lot of these types of burials that are occurring. I think we can get those inquiries. I think that's an optimistic amount of inquiries. I think that might actually be less than that, and the amount that actually materializes, I would suspect to be lower than that. We don't have that data. What I can say is that I'm not aware of any conflict that we've had between land uses as a result of the state permission of these types of family private burials that would rise to the level to encourage local regulations in addition to those state regulations in order to mitigate those conflicts. Over the 23 years I've been here, 22 years, I'm not aware of any land use conflicts as a result of this that may be occurring on private property. The state requires that it be disclosed upon conveyance and also requires that they have the location also disclosed in that conveyance. So, I mean, the state has these checks and balances that are built into the state law. And where our primary concern at this point would be from a land use perspective is if it becomes more of a common practice to do a different type of decomposition, similar to cremation, but not doing it in terms of the final result, but not doing it in a facility that's regulated by the cemetery mortuary board and doing it on private property. Does that rise to the level of warranting additional land use policies? and we don't know. And we thought maybe we would have a little bit of clarity before now, and we still don't. So for that reason, we're making our recommendation based on previous policy that we haven't seen any conflict as a result of that policy in the past.
And based on that statement, my position is we stay status quo.
I agree. I wouldn't mind revisiting this though in July if those rules are out for the composting. I was a little surprised that there are no local regulations on this. So I really appreciate you bringing this to the board's attention, and it certainly has my wheels spinning.
Just to me, the composting sort of spreading the ashes, just put them back in the ground. But one thing that I've asked a lot of the people over the last couple of weeks what they thought of this. If somebody's buried in a casket on the property, is that location documented? And it's not, and I guess the reason being is if I'm the person that bought the property and I see the top of this knoll is a perfect place to build a house, and it's buy and scrape, so I can move the house, then build my new house in the dream location for that view, and you start digging and all of a sudden here's a casket. Or five. That to me is concerning for the buyer. I don't think it's going to be the first buyer. I think the first buyer or the first seller will tell the first buyer, hey, grandpa and dad's buried up on the hill and just want you to know. But that guy owns that property for 20 years and he goes to sell it to the next one. Well, grandpa and dad up on the hill wasn't that important to him because it wasn't his grandpa and dad. Is there a record of that there just to protect the buyer? And I guess it's funny because some of the people I asked just said, well, I'd have no problem just moving the casket and let's just relocate it over 100 feet or something. Other people say, well, I'd want my money back. I don't want to buy property that's got somebody laying in it. So I guess that's the question I'm popped in my mind. And I know it's a lot of work. And I know the state doesn't mandate now. Am I correct on that?
Come again?
Does the state mandate that we locate where the coffins are buried?
The state does require that they have, if you go to their fact page, they state that they require that they identify the location and they disclose that at this point. So that's regulated by the state of Oregon, not any additional local regulations. So we could in fact do additional regulations in addition to that of the Cemetery and Mortuary Board and state law. And that's a power that this board has. If you wanted to move in that direction, it would require that we go through a legislative amendment process to amend our land use codes in order to incorporate those additional standards, whatever they may be.
Well, I think for now, it doesn't sound like there's enough need or interest in this. So I think we can stay status quo, but I think this is something that we may want to visit in the future. With the cost of cremations and burials right now, I see more and more people going to something like this just for cost savings. And so I'm good staying where we're at too right now. Status quo.
Okay, then I'm just going to take that as status quo, and we'll revisit this as we know more. We can come back on a Monday when we get when we start to see some administrative rule be developed around the composting, and let you know, and then look for some additional time for us to analyze that, and then be able to come back at another point to a public meeting to talk about what the potential pros and cons of that legislation could be. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you.
Next up, Criminal Justice Center upgrade, Mr. Hanson.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, in the process of going through exercise to submit a proposal to look at the potential and the design for a criminal justice center across the street on the McMullen property and adjacent lots to the north. That process, our proposals are due at noon on Thursday with AOC. Those proposals will then be distributed to a committee of 6 to review and make recommendations on rankings. There's essentially 3 pots of money that the Department of Justice is looking for. One is a complete replacement, which we do not qualify for at this moment because we're not shovel ready or anything like that. The second is a planning process, which is what we're going to be applying for. And then the third is individual maintenance items that counties submit for that may or may not get approved. And there's usually a limit to those amounts. The state or the Chief Justice allocates 2.5 million or 3 million. And then you see how it fits with the list and all those kind of things. I don't believe we have those numbers yet. I am one of the 6 members on the review committee, so that may or may not help, do not know. So we close on Thursday, we get all the proposals sent to us on Friday, and then Monday, we have our meeting to go over those proposals. And then later down the road, there'll be a secondary meeting with the AOC to move the final recommendation to the Chief Justice and members of DOJ. In our proposal, we'll be requesting $450,000 to do all the planning stages. The idea is building a 3-story building across the street, connecting it to the existing jail facility where we have an arraignment court already. There would be 4 new courtrooms in the new building. The district attorney's office would be relocated over there. That would vacate space in this complex. We would probably be proposing only keeping the remaining historic courtroom and the historic courthouse on the 2nd floor, which is referred to as courtroom 1. All the other courtrooms would then get remodeled for usable space along with court records and the DA on the 3rd floor. The idea being that potentially moving the sheriff's office completely up there or some other department within the county. So we'll find out probably within the next week where we stand on the proposal and whether it can be funded or not at the state level. That's a Chief Justice versus governor budget. Their budget is viewed separately compared to all the other state operated. So the judges have their own kind of little process with the state. So like I said, the proposal is due Thursday. My goal is to finish it up today, if not tomorrow morning, and then let you review it for modifications and that, if you so desire, and then pushing it out the door Wednesday, the day before it's due. I'm also waiting on a support letter from Judge Hill, the presiding judge, which will accompany that proposal.
Can you remind us what the timeline might be? Should we be awarded the money?
If you're awarded the money, I would guess that we could begin the planning process, which we will then have to determine who's involved in that. I guarantee you have to include the current presiding judge or court administrator or both. You probably have to include Chief Justice, DOJ. They have their own security type unit, reviewing security for all court rooms and courthouses. One of their individuals would probably be on that planning process. The DA would be on that, obviously. Myself, probably Matt, the commissioner, if so desired. But, we have the land. We basically have an idea of the footprint and how big a facility it would be. 3 stories. You have a parking facility that I imagine would be across the street with secure parking on the 2nd floor that allows the court staff and that to park on the 2nd floor and walk across via Skybridge to the new structure, those kind of things. We have it pretty well thought out, but haven't really got the exact space. Courtrooms have requirements, court size, jury box. jury room, jury bathrooms, judges' chambers, judges' bathrooms, staff bathrooms, you name it. They're all elements that have to be worked out square footage wise, and the state kind of holds those. The goal of this planning would be to get us to the point where we could then look at a better estimate on the cost of the facility, what share the state would contribute. If we have courts and 1 or 2 satellite offices over there, they will fund up to 50% of the project. And then the other 50% would probably require us to go out to a vote of the people. That, let's just say the building's 30 million, if it's 15 million, you would probably enter into a 20-year bond, and you're looking at 7.5 cents per thousand, which is not a hefty construction bond when you look at City of Salem and their structures that some people in that area have paid for, as we have shaking heads across from me and Morgan and Matt. It would be a very low impact, low cost to the community to get much needed space and a much more secure facility. So that's the goal. Obviously, if we get through the planning process and things don't work out or whatever, then we have to rethink what we plan on doing over there or not. So, but this is the first step. That funding would probably have to be 50-50 too, but I don't know for sure on the planning. I think the state pays for the whole planning. It's just the construction that they're willing to do 50% on. So.
Questions? So in that bond, should we include some money in that bond to remodel the 3rd floor for the sheriff's department?
Yeah.
That'd be included in that.
Yeah. So the state will fund 30% or 50 up to 50% of the project, but theirs would be directed toward the new building where all the courts and all that stuff. Our bond would include all the remodel and the remainder of the funding for that building and the parking structure in that. So,
But to be clear, so that we don't end up with a report here in the newspaper, it's likely to be well beyond our terms.
it's well beyond
That kind of bond discussion will take place.
Yeah, you're probably, that just gets you in line, and we're already behind on that line. So you're probably looking at the earliest, addressing the public with any kind of bond, you're probably looking at 3 bienniums from now. So you're looking 6 to 8 years down the road. So,
Not off the press.
you know,
I was a little concerned just that, Dave, that
it's
counties talk bond negative.
no, not even.
Eyebrows peeking up.
Yeah.
We're planning ahead. That's how
Yeah,
responsible we are.
but yeah, there are, you know, and ours at 30 million, it required state funding of, 15 million is chump change compared to some of the requests that are ahead of us. Multnomah County has $500 million worth of courthouse replacement requests included in theirs. You got Washington County, you got Clackamas County, you got a lot of the big counties that are ahead of us, and there's some small counties that have already been done. So I think the state and Department of Justice is still wanting to move forward on these, just balancing the bonding and that. And you may leapfrog some because you're tiny compared to, the state may say you can go out for $150 million. Well, if you're asking for 250, you don't make that cycle, or you try to figure out how you can bridge 2 bienniums and those kind of things. So just because we're not late to the game, but because where we are in line, probably if this goes forward, you're looking at minimum 6, but probably closer to 8 to 10. I mean, it's a state process and a state funding process. So
Just red tape. Small stuff.
Yep.
No torture.
Any non-listed items today?
I have a couple of you, Will Commissioner. Couple of quick kind of housekeeping measures I'm looking for board approval on. Initially, the county owns a piece of property here in Dallas. It's a bare piece of land zoned commercial that we've taken by tax foreclosure. The city of Dallas would like to acquire that property, and I would recommend that we sell it to them. It's not doing anything for the county, and the city's got some plans for things they might want to do with it, and it just gets it out of our ownership. Board good with that? By consensus, I see approval. I'll get that deeded out. The next one is a development deferral agreement that Mr. Hanson, myself, and Todd Whitaker have been working on for a few months now. It is related to a development in Monmouth, adjacent to a county road, Riddle Road, on the north end of town there. I'm just looking for approval for the board to have Mr. Hanson enter into a deferral agreement. It specifically relates to the improvement of Riddle Road from county essentially standards to city standards, because it will be essentially an apartment complex along that road. So going from our standard ditches to curbs, sidewalks, gutters. The developer is requesting to defer those improvements until later into the development. And we've, as staff, worked out an agreement that we will be happy to defer those improvements till later in the development, provided they provide us with a bond that will cover and guarantee the performance of those improvements being done. And we've reached an agreement. Is everyone comfortable with Mr. Hanson signing that on behalf of the county?
Yes.
Okay.
The jurisdictional transfer will follow shortly.
Yeah. I mean, it gets us there once the improvements are made. The standard holdup for cities taking roads from us is they would like them to improve the city standards before they take jurisdiction of them. And of course, we're not going to spend our money to improve something that's not our standards and then give it away. But I digress. Lastly is back in December, in our latest round of tax foreclosures, the county came into possession of a approximately 32-acre piece of property off of Stone Road, kind of in the northwest area of the county. It's the understanding of staff here that the previous resident of the home passed away without any close relatives in town. Once he was deceased, the taxes weren't paid. 5 years later, it ends up becoming our property. I was contacted last week by an attorney for the estate. Next of kin has finally been notified, even though it took 5 or 6 years, and they've begun a probate process. And they're requesting to allow the estate of the deceased to buy the property back so that it can be included in the probate process going forward. And I'd like to get the board's decision on what you would like to do with that. Alternatively, we would retain it and sell it at auction. My recommendation is to dispossess the property out of our possession as soon as possible and give it back to the estate of the deceased.
Back taxes and the like.
Yes, we would. Mr. Hanson and myself will work out with the personal representative of the estate what the purchase price would be. Back taxes are approximately $16,000. We'll have to do more math to figure out what the interest on that is, but it would be a little above that, would be my assumption.
And we would recover administrative costs associated with work prior to that too. So
And that has to be a cash transaction.
We could carry a contract for it. We're permitted to. I don't know what terms exactly the estate would like to enter. I just want to make sure you guys are comfortable with us working a transaction with the estate of the deceased before I go any
I
further.
personally would prefer we don't carry a contract.
I would agree with that.
I would second that.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? We're adjourned. Thank you.
A lot of business there.
Busy day.
Yeah.